the story to create the perfect journalistic odd couple.
So here we got the Yalie, the college dropout, the Republican, the radical. Did you guys even like each other?
Not particularly.
But Bernstein knew a good reporter when he saw one.
He did the work, and so whatever the other part of it was, he knew how to get a story.
Here's the list, if you can call it that, of all the people Woodward phoned in those early days after the break-in.
The moral of those 2 pages is talk to everyone. You push on every door.
Within 12 weeks, they had pushed the story far beyond the 5 burglars to one of President Nixon's closest confidants.
John N. Mitchell, while serving as U.S. Attorney General, personally controlled a secret Republican fund that was used to gather information about the Democrats, the Washington Post has learned. That's a pretty big story.
They took it to the Post's executive editor, Benjamin Bradley.
Bradley had said to us, there's never been a story like this. You're going to call the Attorney General of the United States a crook.
And Carl had called John Mitchell before we ran the story, and he threatened Katharine Graham,
the owner and publisher of the Washington Post.
He kept saying, Jesus, as I read to him what the story said. And then he said, all that crap you're putting in the paper, if you print that, Katie Graham is going to get her tit caught in a big fat ringer. And when this campaign is over, we're going to do a little story on you 2 boys. And he hung up the phone. And you could tell the stakes.
The stakes were you were either writing history or you were writing your own professional obituaries.
Exactly. And we were confident in the method and the sources, but not absolutely sure. So we're living on a form of thin ice.
A new paperback edition published by CBS's Simon & Schuster calls it the most devastating political detective story of the century.
But this is not a whodunit, because we know whodunit. This is a howdunit. It's a reporter's procedural.
That's right. It is about reporting. It's all about the unglamorous, how do you go about reporting a story? We went out at night and knocked on doors.
One door they knocked on was that of Hugh Sloan, the former treasurer of the Nixon re-election campaign.
You say it in the book that every time you visited Sloan, you felt like vultures. Why?
One, his wife was pregnant and about to deliver a child. And we were hanging outside. We were like buzzards.
You could tell his conscience was troubled. And so he would answer questions and never throw us out. And his wife, Debbie, said something that we'll never forget. She said, "This is an honest house." And that's, as a reporter, that's what you're looking for.
Students come to the University of Texas looking for the chance to lay hands on Woodward and Bernstein's first rough notes of history.
Their eyes will light up and they think, they've had some kind of moving experience just being able to touch the same papers that Woodward and Bernstein touched.
The holy grail of journalism.
Like Woodward's notes from his clandestine meetings with the most famous source in the history of journalism. He is simply X, or my friend. In the book, he became forever known as Deep Throat.
They would talk, then he would go home, type up the notes so that he'd have them to share the next day at the Post.
And the first thing he's got there is a way to untie the Watergate knot.
That's when he really said, look, you're missing the point. There are 50 people doing this. It was massive.
With Deep Throat's guidance, they reported that the Watergate burglary was part of a much larger campaign of political espionage and sabotage against Nixon's political opponents.
That story finally got the attention of the rest of the press, particularly CBS News and Walter Cronkite.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite, with a CBS Evening News special report, The Watergate Affair.
The effect of Walter Cronkite and CBS running those stories said to the country, said to those in the journalism profession, this story is huge, and we give credence to what the Washington Post is doing.
You're not out there on your lonesome anymore.
That's right.
But 2 weeks after their biggest story came their biggest mistake. They incorrectly reported that Hugh Sloan had told a grand jury White House Chief of Staff H.R. Haldeman controlled the fund which paid for all that espionage and sabotage.
I assume you're referring to the testimony before the grand jury as reported in the Washington Post this morning?
Correct.
Our answer to that is an unequivocal no. We did not. Mr. Sloan did not implicate Mr. Haldeman in that testimony at all.
This must be the moment when you throw up.
Worse. We thought we might have to quit.
How many sources did you have for that story?
We had 2 or 3, and we had some logic. And of course, logic isn't a source, and that's one of the lessons that we learned. And it was painful.
So painful that they ratted out an FBI agent they thought had lied to them about Haldeman. They went to his boss.
It was the worst of journalism. Look, we accused the #1 aide to the President of the United States, and the attribution was wrong. We were desperate young men.
So you blew a source, deliberately blew a source.
Yes.
What's the ethics of that?
Probably not terribly good.
And then there is Deep Throat.
Part of your ground rules with him were not just never to even quote him, but never to acknowledge his existence. And you did that in All the President's Men.
Indeed. We felt we had to lay it all out, tell the truth.
Sure, we've done some things wrong in this administration, and the top man always takes the responsibility, and I've never ducked it.
Deep Throat's role in Watergate caused a sensation. Everyone wanted to know who he was.
No, I'm not Deep Throat.
In fact, Mark Felt, the #2 man at the FBI, was Deep Throat.
You put Deep Throat in a position where he had to lie repeatedly in public.
That's right.
But isn't that burning your source?
I had to be aggressive with him. We had to tell the complete story.
In the movie All the President's Men, Deep Throat meets with Woodward in the dead of night in an underground garage.
Cover-up had little to do with Watergate. It was mainly to protect the covert operations. It leads everywhere.
Never has reporting looked so thrilling.
Get out your notebook. There's more.
Woodward calls it the golden age of journalism.
Are we still in the golden age?
No,
No.
not even close.
No.
And the whole culture has changed. The internet age, everything is driven by impatience and speed. And what does that mean? We don't have that time to really dig into stories.
The movie, with its rotary dial and payphone, seems like an age gone by. Except for one thing.
Except for the way you do the work. If you're going to get the story, you still do it the same way.
Well, we have finished with today's work. Sorry about the length of the video. You have until 11:59 to complete the worksheet.